Hello everyone, my name is Natalie and welcome to my channel. In my last video, I talked about my favorite books I read in 2019, and now it's time to talk about the worst. Insert general disclaimer, and I'm not gonna waste my time regurgitating what literally everyone else on BookTube has already said. Also, I'm talking about these in order of least worst to, well, the worst. First on my list of worst books I've read in 2019 is Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman, and I gave this 3 out of 5 stars, which isn't horrible. It was just the most disappointing book I've read in 2019. I loved the first book, Scythe. It was one of my favorite books I read in 2018. I reread it before reading Thunderhead and still loved it, so I was super excited to continue on with the series. Thunderhead delves a lot more into the political side of things, which I definitely don't mind. It was actually pretty cool because you get to learn more about the Scythedom, even on a global scale, and also about its future. You also learn about the Thunderhead a lot more. The title is pretty accurate because the Thunderhead actually acts as a main character in this book, and you actually get chapters from its perspective, which was really interesting. You get to see into its mind and how it thinks and its relationship with the world and with the Scythedom, and it's just really cool. It's one of my favorite parts of the book. You also get a lot more perspectives in this book. It's not just Citra and Ron. You also get chapters from the perspective of Scythe, Faraday, and Curie. You get some from a new character, Grayson, who is kind of working undercover for the Thunderhead, and also some from the head scythe and the villain. The problem was these perspectives weren't well balanced. You would have character A who is doing this thing that's super crucial to the plot, and then you have chapters and chapters and chapters of character B, and you're left hanging on what's happening with character A. And frankly, the parts you're being left in the dark about were typically more interesting. The plot was just executed in a jumbled way, and a lot of the plot twists I guessed, and they weren't really shocking. In fact, there are not one, but 2 resurrection tropes in this story, and I just didn't really care for it. I get that it's a future of Earth that's very technologically and medically advanced, but it's just too convenient. It's a cop-out, and I didn't like it. I was really hoping Neil Shusterman would flesh out the Citra Rowan romance some more, make it a little more believable, because it was one of the weakest points in Scythe, but that didn't happen, and the other side romances weren't that great either. Even though I didn't like Thunderhead that much, I am planning on reading The Toll this year. I have to read it because the ending of Thunderhead was absolutely insane. If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. I have to know how everything works out. Moving on to the next book, A Study in Scarlet by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This is the first Sherlock Holmes mystery, and I gave it 2.5 out of 5 stars because I liked exactly half of it. This book follows Sherlock Holmes and John Watson as they get to know each other and solving their first mystery together. There is a man who has died under suspicious circumstances, but they are unable to identify how exactly he died. The first part is focused on them trying to solve the mystery and hunting the killer down, and of course them getting to know each other, their friendship and partnership developing. The second part is the killer's background, their motivations, and how they got to killing the victim. I loved the first part. I loved seeing the relationship. The thing is, the transition between the 2 parts is so sharp and sudden. When I was first reading it, I thought that I was reading a completely different story. It just gets really, really weird. There's polygamy, kidnapping, forced marriage, bunch of other stuff that didn't sit well with me. Plus, you've spent all this time building up the relationship between Holmes and Watson, and it's the best part of the book, and you get none of that in the second part. And the construction of it just doesn't make that much sense to me. The third book that I really disliked is P.S. I Still Love You by Jenny Han, which I also gave 2.5 out of 5 stars. I've already talked about how much I loved To All the Boys I've Loved Before in my best books of 2019, and this book was so It was not just a disappointment, it was so frustrating. I still really liked Lara Jean for the most part. I didn't agree with some of her decision making and where the author went with that, but she still had some really great character development, and I liked that it still had a focus on the family, and that part was really well done too. The disappointing and frustrating part was the romance. So in this book, Lara Jean and Peter are officially dating. She's dealing with the fact that she might be actually falling in love with him, but it's complicated by the fact that Peter is still hanging out with his ex Genevieve, who hates Lara Jean for whatever reason, and then John Ambrose McLaren, who was sent one of her secret love letters, appears, kind of wants to start a relationship with her. And Peter doesn't like that she's hanging out with John Ambrose McLaren. So you have conflict between Lara Jean and Genevieve over something that happened back in middle school, which we don't know for most of the book. There's conflict between Lara Jean and Peter because he's hanging out with Genevieve, may still have feelings for her, won't tell her why. And he's being very vague and elusive about it, and then the whole thing is just increased by John Ambrose McLaren. In the end, like, I get why Peter wasn't going to tell her because it wasn't his place, because of how personal it was. But he could have told her that, but he didn't. He just ended up being really stupid and frustrating. And Lara Jean let it get to her, and then they just all decided to play this game. Was it Assassin? It was Assassin or something similar. And it gets out of hand and personal and messy real fast, and it's just really stupid and frustrating how they decide to deal with the conflict. Just like with the Arc of a Scythe series, I want to read the last book. Even though there were a lot of stupid decisions and unnecessary drama in this book, I'm still pretty invested in the relationship. Book number 4 of the worst books I've read in 2019, and also the first of the books I rated 1 star, which I don't do very often, was The Last of August by Brittany Caballero. I like to give books a fighting chance, but oh boy, this book was a hot mess. The Last of August is the sequel to A Study in Scarlet, which I also read in 2019 and loved. The whole series follows the modern day descendants of Sherlock Holmes and John Watson and their mysteries and adventures together. I'm realizing how many sequels made it to this list, and I just hope they all just suffer from middle book syndrome and the book after them is really good. I can't even remember what this book was really about because the plot in this book was all over the place. So I think this book was just so bad I kind of blocked out of my memory because I don't remember much of what it was about. I think there was some kind of art heist. I think that was supposed to be the mystery they were solving, but most of the book was consumed by unnecessary relationship drama. So in this book, it turns out that August Moriarty wasn't exactly an enemy, but there's still bad blood. He's very much alive. They end up having to work with him for this new mystery they're solving. Jamie gets jealous because of Charlotte's complex history with August and the fact that she may still have feelings for him, even though August makes it so clear he wants no part in a love triangle. For most of this book, Jamie is an absolute idiot jerk, very selfish and reckless and impulsive, and I hated it. I felt like it was just really out of character and, again, unnecessary drama. There is rampant miscommunication or lack of communication for little reason except to cause drama and conflict and drive the plot. Yes, Charlotte can be elusive and not want to be vulnerable, but not to the extent of this book. And Jamie, again, he's just being an idiot jerk. The actual mystery plot is completely overshadowed by the lovers' quarrel. It's confusing, ridiculous, over the top, and most of it was crammed into like the last quarter of the book. Another aspect of this book that I think is important to address is the fact that it also deals with the aftermath and trauma of sexual assault. The book does talk a lot about consent and trying to navigate a relationship with someone who has been assaulted. I'm a little iffy on how it was handled just because of how Jamie was acting and just the complete disregard for communication throughout this book. He kind of wants more than what she's fully comfortable with, and also I guess how it's mainly from Jamie's perspective. You don't get to fully see what's going on in Charlotte's mind and with her emotions and how she's dealing with it. It's a bit iffy, but still I think somewhat respectful and nowhere near as bad as the next book. The last book on this list, and the absolute worst book that I read in 2019, is The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender by Leslie Walton. I've already ranted about this book in a wrap-up. I think it was like my Reading Rush wrap-up or Simmerthon or something. So I'm gonna try and keep it short here. Basically, it's a magical realism book about this girl named Ava Lavender and her family, and all the women in the family have these magical powers, and they are also plagued by very tragic stories, especially when it comes to their love life. So it's supposed to be Ava's kind of coming of age story. Also this creepy priest guy who becomes obsessed with her. The magical realism is very weakly developed, sometimes confusing. I had a lot of questions about it. The women's magical abilities was initially the thing I thought was really cool, but it's not really explained. There wasn't much plot in this book, which I maybe wouldn't have minded as much if there had been a heavy focus on the characters and a lot of character development. But most of the characters weren't fleshed out well, and the little actual plot there is riddled with giant plot holes. The book seemed completely driven by this idea of fate. And it all has to lead up to this one thing, this one ending. That's how it has to be. To me, it seemed more like the author wanted this thing to happen and didn't allow the characters any chance of true agency. Now for, I guess, kind of a spoilery part, because it's really what bothered me. It's the one thing that the book is leading up to, and that is a very distressing rape and mutilation scene. What bothers me most isn't that this scene is included, but that it's used simply as a plot device and a way to move the plot forward. This brutal attack somehow is able to break the curse over the Lavender family, break the cycle of sorrow. Their lives can get better and they can move on from the tragedy of their family history. The last few pages are dedicated to this character's recovery from the attack. Even that aspect isn't handled that well because we don't get to see much of it. It's mainly from other characters' perspective. And again, it's crammed in the last few pages, and I really mean that. It's like the epilogue. It's probably no more than 10 pages long. Those were my top 5 worst books I read in 2019. What about you? Share your worst reads of the year down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Keep reading, and I'll see you next time here on The Mighty Quill.